The following is an Operation Podcast production.
Creating a culture of love.
Choosing to live in fear can sometimes feel easier.
Oh, yeah.
But choosing love for yourself so that you can give love to other people is one of the hardest things.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
When we start forgetting, like, we think wealth is all about money. And
Yeah.
materialism, you know?
I was ashamed of my past in the beginning and didn't talk about it. And then I wanted to start talking about it and bring in meditation and healing. And I was silenced for so long.
I was painting a mural in their location, new one opening up in El Segundo.
Yep.
And you guys were doing this whole huge activation out front in the lawn.
Teaching workouts.
Doing our
thing. Yeah.
And it was packed.
Yeah.
So you are one half of Tone It Up Girls. Like, you grew this empire back in 2009.
Yes.
I mean, I would even say you were like the OG of what an influencer came from, right? You were the original influencer.
We were like the influencers before there was a name for an influencer.
Exactly.
which I always say, like, I don't love that word now, but we are influential.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the positive aspects of the word, it's been polarized. It's been a little tabooed, but at the end of the day, it's people making impact, people making a change. And a lot of your mission was, and just remembering, because some of my friends, they were like, oh my God, you know the Tone It Up Girls? I'm like, yeah, I just met them. They're like, oh my God. And I just thought, like, I need to really look into this. But like you grew this mass following, right? Because you were inspiring women of all shapes and sizes to just get healthy and take care of themselves. And it wasn't, which is, I think, why influencer is a little tabooed now, this super skinny, perfect human that's face-tuned and photoshopped. You were like, just go love yourself, go move, go get into yoga, go do something. And these communities were just beautiful. And I think that was, based on self-love and health.
Yeah, Tone It Up was based on the love of, for me, from fitness, just being a healing space for me and creating me, or helping me love myself, move through dark times, and then wanting to share that message with the masses. And it happened naturally, and that was Tone It Up. And then it was really community, which is so important. And we were the first fitness community to have millions of women connecting with each other and be like, oh, I'm working out because I'm going to meet up with my girlfriend. I'm going to do this and that and that. And it really, I believe now there's so many different communities who get together through fitness. And I think it's important.
No, it definitely is. I mean, those were like early days, not the origin of CrossFit. CrossFit was starting to get a little popular, because I got into CrossFit at 2008.
Okay.
But it's the community that kept you going. So if you start building these communities, that's what keeps us in places.
Yeah.
That's what.
Our girls in our community weren't into CrossFit. We were a little too much, but we were into yoga and HIIT and lifting weights and, doing cardio and all of that. So it's a different vibe of, whatever you wanted to do and whatever season you're in.
No, and I was a CrossFitter, and my friends that weren't CrossFitters were Tone It Up Girls.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We were like, don't do CrossFit. You're going to injure yourself.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
To each their own. Do what you need to do. Get ego out of the way and just move.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. So you did that, for over a decade. You turned it into everything. I mean, I remember walking through Target and I think seeing kettlebells and dumbbells and all kinds of little things everywhere. And I'm like, wow, how did I know they were so big?
Well, and the great thing is that we built this community through social media, being the first influentials on Instagram and YouTube. And then it was a Tone It Up girl, because they our community created their own hashtags, like hashtag TIU team and all that. And Kat and I at the time were like, what is TIU? And then we were like, oh, it's Tone It Up. We're just like, "Ugh." But yeah, and it was a toned up girl who worked at Target who went to her higher ups and said, "You need to have toned up in Target." And that's how it all started. It's like this community that believes in the mission and this togetherness. And it's just such a beautiful story about how it all unfolds from the beginning to perhaps the end and beyond, and the different changes. It's really something that me as a little kid would never have even imagined.
And what's beautiful with that is you were committed to creating this, you had this vision and then you had this mission. And that's what turned into all this other stuff. I always say, you know, like, you never know who you're talking to that can open a door for you. So you just be you always.
Yeah.
With a smile, take it on, say yes, and see what happens.
Yeah.
Say no if it doesn't feel good, and you never know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So you're in a new space, though. You're in a new place in your life. You're obviously still part of that, keeping it going. It's one of your first babies, let's say. But now you're transitioning into the next you. What's Karena doing now? How is she going to impact her community? Reinventing yourself, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say reinventing, but just moving forward. I call it Karena 3.0. I had 1.0, which was pre-tone it up, which is it's a triathlete and my healing process through fitness. And then there was Tone It Up 2.0. And now what is important to me, because everything that I've done in life when I've overcome my past was, how can I have social impact? And mental health has been really important to me. I grew up with a mother who was diagnosed schizophrenic and out of the house in the 90s, and also then later diagnosed with depression and NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And really, because it skipped a generation, my passion is to give back, because I suffered so much. And I know with you also with your family have gone through a lot, and we're finally talking about mental health.
Yes.
Finally. I mean, there's a huge stigma still, and I get a lot of shit about talking about stuff and mental health, because it's always wants to be pushed to the side, and but the fact that for me and my sister Rachel, who runs our foundation, this mental illness skipped a generation. So how can we give back?
Yeah.
And how can we help people? I just always, it's all about giving back.
No, so you've created this nonprofit now, right? This new foundation, and you've written a book on this, right? It's a memoir.
Yes.
Talking about this journey of yours. What was the moment that you looked back on or said, you know what, I'm going to put a stake in the sand and I'm going to tell this story now. I'm ready to open up. I'm putting it out there.
The moment was, I always wanted to write a memoir, basically not because I'm like, I want to share my story and do this. It was a journal, basically. Yeah. And so I always preach about writing down your thoughts and this and that. And I realized at one point that I could write down, number one, it helped me in my healing. And number two, it could help others. And I had journals from starting at 8, 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I have them all still. I don't know how, because I moved from Indiana to LA and lived in like every 6 months moving somewhere new. I still have, and now in Texas, I still have these journals. A stack of them.
That's amazing.
So it helped me with writing it, but it was really just when I became a caretaker for my mom and was told she was going to pass soon. And like, this is the time I need to start writing. And it took me 5 years. And then I thought I was done. And then she passed and I had to keep writing. But it was really just to help myself and to help others and realize that we all go through this. The one thing that's inevitable, death and taxes.
Yeah.
And it really was a healing process for me.
What was it like when you started that process, you started looking back at these journals. But what was it like reading your 8-year-old voice or your 9-year-old voice? And secondary to that, was it more authentic and raw than as you got older? Maybe you put up more walls and less vulnerability? Did your voice or tone change?
Yeah. What it was like to read that when it has a date on it, and I'm like, this is Karena at 11 years old talking about suicide. And I'm like, fuck. And that's one of my biggest drivers of doing the mental health foundation is like, no one should, like a young kid like that should not be feeling like that. It's very emotional to go back to that and then to write it.
Yeah.
And the editing. And then now I'm doing an audiobook. Is that audio okay? No. Okay. Sorry. I'm so aware of audio. I know you'll edit that out, but it's heavy. Mm-hmm. But it makes you think of whenever I go back into that experience, and now I can look at that experience and be like, okay, what needs to be done for the future generations and your kids? And how can we help them so that they don't feel so alone like I did or you did as little kids, and that kid inside of us that is still healing. And so that's what my work is now. How can we save future generations? And now even, you know, with the pandemic and everything, there's so much suffering and speaking up. So back then I just hid with myself and I isolated myself. And I don't know, that's my work now. That's my transition.
Yeah. So at 11 years old, you're reading these words, thinking suicide, contemplating this, the thoughts of that. Can't even imagine at 11 myself thinking of that. But there's this new like epidemic and pandemic, whatever we want to call it, whatever word, where 11-year-olds now and 12-year-olds and high school kids are thinking this now. And we're in an even more connected world, so to speak, but we're even more disconnected and lonely. So like, you were thinking that back then. Imagine how we know it's amplified now. So that only makes that mission more important, and you being in service and really delivering it.
Absolutely. And when you talk about isolation, I was on Chase's podcast yesterday and talking about how I, on my podcast, had a doctor on talking about with isolation is the effects on your body are worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And we're talking about like forced isolation, locking the door, leaving yourself in the room and thinking.
Yeah, just being isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
I know. It's like, shit, I used to smoke 15 cigarettes a day and was isolated.
Damn. Right? You're like, I'm glad I'm
fucked.
here. I'm glad I turned it around. Well, I'm sure those years of toning up kind of did a little course correction.
For anyone listening, I do not smoke cigarettes anymore. I stopped when I was 19, but
yeah, that's when we thought it was cool.
Oh yeah. Oh, so bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I tried one in like 8th grade. I don't remember who was smoking. I'm like, this is cool. I've seen it in the movies. And I'm like, no, this is not.
Isn't that crazy back then? And like, literally after school, my friends and I would go in front of the market. It was called Friendly Foods. And we'd ask somebody, and it's like $2 for cigarettes. And be like, will you get us? And they're like, sure. It's like an older person. I'm like, you're getting cigarettes for kids?
But I mean, no one knew.
Yeah.
We knew, but we didn't know like we know now.
Yeah.
You know, like the impacts of that. I mean, think of it this way. Marijuana is legal now. Back then it was like, oh, you're a criminal. What are you doing? Now it's like, hey, everything, gummies, CBDs, oils, you name it. It's all over the place. That's just the thought process of what's going on. So we're having struggles with your mother. She's in and out. She's battling mental health. And sometimes we don't even realize that the mental health journeys of other people directly impact our own mental health to cause traumas and our own versions of PTSD and things like that. Can you walk me through any particular moments or events that, hey, we should pay attention to, right? Early red flags of like, these people have X, Y, and Z. But two, what it started having you do in your mental health, or maybe habits that you were creating?
Yeah. So I think first I want to touch on, now that we are talking about mental health more, the word empathy comes to mind because I think that's so important. And I had to learn that with my mother. So I was very young when my mom was, in and out of the house. It's obviously, I'm not going to tell the whole story here, but in and out of the house and hospitals and this. And I had to educate myself on what schizophrenia was by going to the hospital or not hospital, the library after the hospital and getting a book and learning what it was. And a lot of times family members get angry and judge that person. Like, this is your fault. And this, I think with mental illness, it's really hard for families to even understand it. And so, yes, that can impact me as a teenager, really impacted me through and sent me into 10 years of, I call it situational depression, because I was so lost. Didn't have my mom present, didn't have her love. And so that went through, 10 years of just darkness. And then how do you come out of that and learning to love instead of fear? And that is one of the most important things, I think, when you have a family member who is having psychosis or any diagnosis is, okay, number one, for me, I lived in fear. That's why I went into drug misuse, suicide ideation, because I was living in fear that I would become her. So when I chose not to live in fear, I said, Karena, and this is in Hollywood. I lived in LA now. I woke up in a park after a 3-day bender. Wow. And I was in my own depression, because that's what happens after 3 days of that. And I said, there is something in you that is greater. This is not what your life is meant to be. So what do you do then? You don't need to be sad. You are not going to be your mother and your grandfather who died by suicide and had schizophrenia. This is going to skip a generation. What do you do? When was your happiest? I was a kid running a half marathon, working out. So I made that choice, and it's these choices, and it's the hardest thing to make a choice. I always say, like, choosing to live in fear can sometimes feel easier.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sometimes. Let me take that word away.
It is very much
it's easy.
Yeah.
Let me lay on that couch. Easy. Easy. But choosing love for yourself so that you can give love to other people is one of the hardest things. Yeah. So, okay. Switched out Hollywood clubs to waking up at sunrise and surfing, training for a triathlon. And that was in going to therapy and reading every self-help book. And that was the transition. I was just like, this isn't you. It's that gut feeling. And if you listen to that gut feeling, like, it's there. And you just have to keep listening to it and believing in it and dropping those bad habits and turning them to good. And I don't know, that was just the most, like, aha moment. And it took years, but it was beautiful. And then once I got to that, that's how I wanted to share that with other women and started tone it up.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. But that voice is inside of us, and we tend to quiet it down, right? The noise around us is too easy, and fear is super loud and very comfortable at times. And we don't listen to it. Because I remember, one day asking, who will I be? You asked that question. There's something greater in me. What are you going to do about it? Like, there's that moment. I always ask sometimes, like, do we have to hit our rock bottom? And what is that rock bottom? And hopefully we do have that moment to ask the question. But can we get there without getting so low sometimes?
Well, every rock bottom for each person is different.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, I'm like sky high, doing perfect, but then you have those moments.
Yeah.
Like in the passing of my mother, I think I hit another rock bottom. And that was also during pandemic. And so now I'm like, you can do this, girl. You've done it before. I'm not like rock bottom, like not doing like meth or anything.
Yeah. You're like, I'm not waking up in parks.
No, I'm not waking up after. But I'm just saying, like, some sadness and this and less motivation. But now I'm picking myself up. I'm like, I know how to do this. I've already been through the worst. I've been through it. And that's one of the things, too. Not that you're asking, but I'm going to say this, is being in that rock bottom and getting out. Then later in life, you realize, like, I got this.
Yeah.
And you give yourself so much more grace of, today I'm feeling this way. Okay, I can get through this. I've already done it. And whether it's in relationships, business, friendships, all of that.
Yeah. No, we're fallible. We're human. I say, I had my moments of depression, and sometimes people are like, well, you go paint love around the world. You must be so happy and optimistic all the time. I'm like,
but that's a reminder for you.
Exactly. That's choosing the work every single time. I have my moment. There's days in here where like, I just want to lay on that couch over there and woe is me about like whatever.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen and it's going to be there. But remembering that.
Well, that's the beauty of what you even do, like color and painting and art. And art can be in so many different forms. But that is when you're feeling down, pick up that paintbrush. Pick it up. When you're feeling down, go to the gym.
Yeah.
Get out in nature. Go for a hike. It's those little things that you don't realize that those are the things that get you back up.
Yeah. And take your own empowerment in that moment and go do it because you never regret it after the fact.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're drudging your way to the gym or the hike, but then when you're there, you're like,
I would say you never regret a workout.
Exactly.
Endorphins.
Even it doesn't have to be your best workout either. It's just showing up and just realizing like, wow, I empowered myself. I made a choice to move forward instead of staying stagnant.
Yeah. Well, even with your love everywhere, that's what you paint. Like you're inspiring. It's kind of what I'm doing with Big Silence and mental health. It's sharing that message and someone sees you doing it or me doing it and it's like, we got this.
Yeah. So going back a couple steps, you were talking about, the families getting angry and all that. And in those spaces, there's a lot of guilt and shame. What are some of the tools that you've used to kind of work through the guilt or the shame? Because now sharing it, you've worked through the shame, right? The shame cycle's kind of worked through and you're like, I'm putting it out there. So you're on the other side of it. But sometimes there is this guilt. There is, forced, I need to stay with my family because they birthed me. Or, this is my circumstance and this is all that I got.
Well, I think we have two different perspectives on that because I have been known to just like stick to it till the end. And with my mother, taking care of her the last 5 years of her life, I'm just one of those people who just like never lets go. I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, but I don't know. I think for me, I just stick to it and give it up my all and everything just so I have no regrets. But then I respect my sister who stepped away from the relationship with my mom. And I hope she has no regret. I think in everyone's life and their family situations, we do what we feel is best for us. And I think that's number one, and not being selfish of this is what's good for me, for my mental health, for my family, for my husband, wife, partner, I don't think there should, as long as you're a good damn person, there should be no regret on the choices that you make with family situations.
Yeah. As long as you're clear in that and make peace with it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
A life of regret is just, sometimes you hear people say, oh, I regret dating that person, or I regret taking that job, or I'm like, all of that made you who you are today.
Yeah, and that's what I say with my mother. She, on her last days, I regret, and other friends who are like, oh, I regret this. I would have done this differently. I'm like, you know what? I told my mom, please don't regret. She's like, I wasn't a good mom. I wasn't this. I'm like, but you should be proud of the girl you raised without being there. And that's okay. And then my other friends are like, oh, I should have done this. I'm like, but look at you now. Like, we all learn and go through so many life lessons. And again, going back to just be a good damn person. Yeah, exactly. And an honest person. And then don't regret anything. We all can make decisions. Whoops, messed up there. But you have to make mess ups to have the great things.
Yeah, let's learn from those mess ups, right?
And it's fine. I think we're all too hard on ourselves. This is such a short time to be here on earth. Like, we all need to loosen up a bit.
Yeah, forgive ourselves, be a little graceful with ourselves, empathetic with ourselves, kind to ourselves. Laugh. Yeah, no, the Bible says be kind and compassionate, right? Turn the other cheek. I'm like, do you ever do that to yourself though?
What?
No, I'm just saying, it's like we'll kind for other people, but sometimes we're not as kind to ourselves.
I mean, there's been times in my past where I'm not kind to myself. But I think as you get older, you learn, and you can kind of laugh at that and be like, oh, I used to think that, or put so much judgment or, on myself. And being too worried about what other people think about you and all that stuff. And I think that's one of my biggest lessons, especially in the past, I would even say 5 years, which is not that long, that I've learned to, and I just be me. Yeah. Be you.
Care less.
Yeah.
In your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, right? You basically, you care everything what everyone thinks about you. Then you care a little less, and then a little less. And then at some point you start realizing that you don't care, you don't give a shit about what anyone thinks about you.
Yeah.
But then he was getting to the point of what truly matters in wealth is when your kids are adults, if they hang out with you. And I'm like, damn, because I look back at my life, like, I look back at other people around me, and I look at some of the ones that are here and here and here, and I'm like, that makes total sense. Yeah. And we start forgetting, like, we think wealth is all about money and materialism,
No, it's not about money. Been there, I'm here. And it's about relationships. Yeah. As you know, I don't have kids, but for personal reasons. And I'm like, what's important is my husband, hanging out with my family, doing all that. Like, the financial wealth does not bring happiness. No. But I will say financial wealth then can help other people.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's important.
No, there's a value to it for sure. It's not taboo. In my 20s, to me, money was all about, can I get bigger rims? Can I get a nicer car? Can I have more diamonds on my watch? Like, and then I lost it on them. Ooh, yeah, there's more to life. Let me figure this thing out.
So then how did you come back and...
Well, I rebuilt myself. Yeah. And then I went into another business. So that was real estate, and then I went to finance.
You went to finance. That's when I met you. Yeah.
And then 5 years into finance, I'm like, no, I'm in this circle again. But I didn't value the money the same way, or let it define me. Let me reframe. I value it. Yeah. But I didn't let it define me. Like, I am not defined by my Escalade like I was in my 20s. Yeah. So it's like looking at it.
I got rid of my G-Wagon. I was like, this is stupid. Yeah.
And it's like a double-edged sword, because you're like, oh, cool. But then it's like... It's like,
it's my dream life, and then this. I know. And like, why am I spending money on this?
Why am I $2,500 car payment? What? You know what you could do with that? So you've got this memoir.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about your mother, your struggles with that, coming out of it. But I'd like to go in a little bit deeper on the relationship. Like, she moves back in with you and your husband.
She was in with us, and then she had to have special care. So she was elsewhere, but we were a daily caregiver. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that start taking a toll on your marriage and your personal life in that capacity?
Well, first of all, my husband had only met my mom one time
Ooh.
before we got married, before we were engaged. And then after we got back from our honeymoon was when we found out that she was in the hospital and had a stroke and was 3 months there. And we immediately went in to take care of mom.
Mm-hmm.
And he had he knew she had schizophrenia, but he didn't know what that was. And so it affected our marriage. Number one, shout out to Bobby, because he was like, I need to educate myself.
Yeah.
And so we signed up for a family to family course through NAMI, which anyone out there, if you have a family member who suffers from mental illness and you're like, I don't understand this, and this was my husband's idea, it's a 13-week course, in person, kind of a support group, once a week, and you learn all about different types of mental illness, 5150s, the medication cocktails, how to have empathy. And he just went there every night. He's like, Tuesday night, we got to go to NAMI. And he just was such a great husband in that way, to support and want to understand, so he could support me and also have empathy for my mother. But then it becomes a lot. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of the energy would go towards my mother, where I feel like he felt neglected because my energy was going to my mom or my business. And then if I was stepping away from my business more to take care of my mom, then the people at the business were like, well, where's Karena? I'm like, I'm with my mom, And so it's kind of navigating this thing of marriage, myself, and my business. Like, what is most important? So it was definitely another most difficult part of my life to navigate. And a lot of guilt for me, we had talks of divorce, and we're very open about that. Like, and then, when my mom passed, it was even now, what is marriage without my mom?
Because it was right after it happened.
Yeah. And that's now 2 years ago that she passed, and we're like, okay, so now we can be intimate. Now we do that. It's another thing where that's life. You're continuously like going through, okay, this is the next step. How do, the traumas, and not obviously, but when my mom passed, me as a person having to figure out what is life without mom, because I'm used to mom trauma bonding, dealing with chaos. Yeah. So how do I move on with mom gone?
Because that's a huge anchor in your life. That's a limb.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after, 30 plus years of her and her mental illness and her, sickness. And then I'm like, it's gone.
So you don't know
who am I?
Yeah. So was there a little relief at the beginning, and then that maybe turned into some guilt, or like, how did you start processing that?
If we talk about grief, just because I've worked with grief counselors, and they always say, the first year is easy. Not easy. I take that word back. Yeah. But it's kind of like, okay, you're a little numb. In the grand scheme of it all. You're a little numb. I definitely went through another situational depression because my mother, because I was her caretaker, I would say even from a teenager, it's kind of, it's hard for people to understand this, but I say it was almost my child. Like, I took care of her. I checked on her. I had hospitals, paid, I bought her a house at the end. And, you know, like she was, you know, I always made sure she was safe when I could, unless she ran away.
Yeah.
And so there was that first year of laying on the couch. And then my grief counselor said second year is harder because then you have guilt of survival guilt. I was like, oh. And I got a lot from people of like, when are you going to get over it? This, that, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't say that. But now I am at a great place now, moving through it. But anyone listening here, like, allow yourself that process of grief and losing loved ones, whether through passing on earth or friendships and any kind of relationships. Grieve. It's normal.
Just taking the time to really sit in it, own it, and not trying to pass over it.
Yeah.
Because one thing I've heard around grief is some people may numb themselves for a very long time and never get to the second stage. And then they'll get there. But they didn't even realize it. And all of a sudden, a decade later, they're actually finally mourning. Like, imagine what did you, those 10 years just disappear? Or
like, where were you? But you mourn the fuck out of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, allow that. It's perfect. You're allowed that.
Would you say it helps? I mean, because we started with this. Death is inevitable. We're born to die. It's written in our genes. Would you say that helped a little bit, knowing, like, I knew she was going to die. But.
Yeah. Did it help? I knew she was going to die, but I also, I helped. She was supposed to be in hospice when I first took her in, and they said 2 weeks. And I changed her diet and everything, and she lived 5 more years. Death was inevitable, but in that time, me, which is just trauma, little kid Karena.
Well, you gave her 5 more years of life.
Yes.
That's amazing, though.
Yeah. Well, I thought she would be like a great mom and we would bond and all of that, but
yeah,
didn't quite happen. I love you, Mom. Love you, Linda. I know you're sitting there on the couch. The medium told me, but I did. You know, I'm just the type of person again that's just like, I'm not gonna give up. But I don't know. But I've learned a lot about death and accepting that, and I'm the only one of my closest friends who's lost a parent. I know that a lot of people have, and I know how to support a friend or a loved one now who loses someone like that.
Yeah. No, that's a powerful place to be in.
Yeah.
'Cause I can't say I have those skills, you know, but life happens regardless.
Yeah.
And it's to you or for you, however you want to frame it, but it's happening for us. It's unveiling. It is what it is.
Yeah.
It's the beautiful part of life. So through this experience, you know, how do you define love? Before and now.
I had to learn how to love again. And this is where I will try not to get teary-eyed, but as a kid, love was my parents. And you look up to them. They are love.
Yeah.
They are your God and your goddess. And when that is taken away and you're not understanding, you don't believe, you don't trust love. So part of that shifting moment in that park one morning when I knew something was greater was, and knowing that I wasn't going to be like my mother, was number one, learning to trust myself and to love myself again through, again, fitness, therapy, books, meditation, all the things. It's such hard work. And then I could love myself, and I learned then to trust others again. and to love others again.
Yeah.
And not believe that I would just be hurt again. And that's a really important thing for people in relationships, whether it's a parent or a partner that perhaps was abusive or had a personality disorder. Like, learn it. Like, how do you overcome that? Because once you can get over that, it's great. And it's not going to be easy. Relationships are not easy. Loving again, trusting in friendships, trusting in marriage. It's not easy. Again, one of those things that's like, it's harder to do that than lay on that couch all day. It's just the work and not being afraid to call in help. And to have a voice and talk to people. And I'm telling you, therapy is so freaking important.
Yeah.
And different, I've done like EMDR and talk therapy and this and that. And it's do the work because it's so worth it on the other side. And I've finally, mid-20s was able to be in a relationship again and trust someone, and then trust myself enough to love myself that wasn't a healthy relationship, leave. It's like, then found my husband. We've been together 12 years now, and sometimes I hate him.
It's normal, right? It's normal.
You're so annoying, but all the times I love him.
Yeah.
I love him, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think it's so important when you define love is just that deep connection with yourself, and then that you can show someone else.
Yeah. No. And it's true. And love, you have to choose it. You have to lead into it actively. And it's when you don't want to. It's easy when it's like, oh, we're going on a date. It's Valentine's Day. Here's some flowers, babe. Like, that's not love. That's romance. That's surface level. That's even with marriage, like learning now that I have a child, like that just changes the dynamics of marriage. Like marriage, saying I do, that's the starting line. From conversations I've had or even past thought process, we think that's the finish line.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Exactly. And it's just realizing that, like, okay, if we're in it to win it, like, there's going to be very bad days.
Yeah, and that's okay. I think that's a really important message, too, is even with Bobby, when we were having a difficult time, I think he was so fixed on that marriage is going to be perfect. And I'm so used to chaos. So put us together, and I'm like, this is great. And he's like, this is awful. I was like, what? This is, I'm very, we're just learning about your partner and learning that I'm like, it's not going to be easy all the time. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just be a good damn person.
Yeah, that's it. Be good to yourself.
Yeah.
So a big act of self-love and choosing love, and we spoke about this earlier, is you made a conscious choice not to have children, not to move forward. Can you walk me through that decision? Because it's a very empowering decision. It's a powerful stance. And also sometimes as women and as women that I speak a lot, they sometimes think all I want to do is be a mother and have kids. So it's like, what is navigating that conversation and that choice, and how has that empowered and affected you?
Yeah. So that choice was a conversation I had with Bobby prior to getting married. And then at that point I was kind of maybe not, but then with my mom and being her caretaker, and because I grew up with mental illness and skipped a generation, my grandfather died by suicide and schizophrenic, and I was like, oh my God, I'm mentally sane. Like, I don't have this illness. And I told Bobby, I'm like, I don't want to spend the second half of my life with the possibility of going through the trauma of mental illness again. I don't know, some people may understand it or may not. But for me, I made that choice and he fully supported. And I was like, finally, I feel free. I can not have these days of it's just, it was too much for so long, for 30 years, 30 plus years. And I was like, I just want to be me.
Yeah.
Have fun with you. Love you. Go travel. Do this. Do all the things I couldn't do without anxiety or stress. And so he, I mean, we still talk about it sometimes, like maybe, but you know, we made that choice. And I get a lot of pressure being a public person. Like, when are you going to have kids? This, that. And like, I am very happy and content. But I do have 5 Pomeranians and a cat.
Ooh. It's a whole lot of hair.
Yeah. So those are our children. That is our family. We are happy. It's, you know, I know the trauma and stress of, even in those NAMI family to family courses, we would meet couples that were, you know, in their 50s, and their teenage kid was just getting diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. And it's so stressful. And so shout out to anyone who has a child or a parent who has a mental illness. And that was just the choice that we made.
Yeah. So, random fun fact.
Okay.
There's a guy that walks up and down my street right here.
Yeah.
He looks like a human Pomeranian. He has 5, and it's him walking all 5 like every day. I think it's the cutest thing. I've talked to him a few times. He's like, yeah, I got stuck with all the dogs.
No, my husband's like, I hate small dogs. And now he has 5 and he loves them. And every morning they're in bed, the first thing, they wake us up and they only go to him and lick his face. They don't even pay attention to me. They love him.
That's funny. You said that and I pictured him like, oh, anyway. So with the kids' conversation, obviously it's not black and white hard line, and life can happen. But just out of curiosity, what about conversations of adoption or anything like that?
There was a point where, I'm just saying everything, I just overtalk and overshare, but I was thinking about freezing my eggs in case, and then we were open to adoption, but then I still have that same concern. Yeah. And not to anyone, like, just my own personal thoughts.
No, the facts are the facts.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. I just wanted to ask.
But maybe, I mean, you never know.
You never know.
We had a little pregnancy thing recently, scare, and Bobby's like, "That's okay, let's just do it." I'm like, ah. But
if life really wants to give it to you, it's gonna give it to you. And you will embrace it and do the Karena thing. So you'll be fine.
Yeah.
No, it's a journey. Like, my wife's pregnant with our second one right now.
Yeah.
And from 1 to 2, the conversations we have, I'm like, 1, he's been to 12 countries under 3 years old. Like, he's my backpack, right?
Yeah.
We take him with us everywhere.
I love that.
But now having another one, it's like, oh, now that's 4 seats on a plane. It's a little different. I think we won't travel as much, just in the logistics aren't, but we're still going to do it.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting because it does change some dynamics, but only as much as you allow it to.
Yeah. Well, I think right now, too, because my mom was such a big part of our first part of our marriage, I really want to just focus.
It's like a honeymoon phase right now, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I want it to be us. You know what? Should we have people watch the dogs? Let's really make it us.
No, we do. His dad flies out and watches the dogs, and like we go off.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, the big silence. What does that mean?
The big silence is everything that nobody talks about. The quiet conversations that are happening.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And for myself, even through Tone It Up, I was ashamed of my past in the beginning and didn't talk about it. And then I wanted to start talking about it and bring in meditation and healing. And I was silenced for so long because of the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came up with the big silence is like, let's talk. I'm done being silenced. I'm done being like, oh, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't do this. I don't want people to judge me or the stigma of anything. So it's gonna big silence, say it out loud.
So part of silencing yourself back when you were doing Tone It Up, it was vocal, it was public, it's in front of people. Did you ever think that you weren't being authentic or your true self, or doing a disservice to your community because you weren't 100% Karena?
Yeah.
And that's what you're letting out now?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
How did that impact you during that time?
It didn't make me feel good to not be authentic to who you are and talk about where you came from and this. It's all, unicorns and rainbows and this and that. And there was something missing for me. And so I was ready to just talk. And that's why I started the podcast, wrote the book. And I'm like, it just, and that for anyone, even you talking about your personal stuff, it's, opening up. It's really healing to just talk about things unapologetically and not having a facade of perfectionism.
Yeah, perfectionism is real.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like, oh, it's not perfect. Ooh, but that comes from fear.
Yeah, exactly.
That comes from judgment. That comes from, I look back, I'm like, well, I'm not afraid of failing. Not afraid of succeeding. But what people think of me, right? Those are those things. I think that affects men a lot more, but very much so. I think, even like when my wife was pregnant, we were learning like some of the mommy bullying and stuff that happens.
What?
Yeah, it's just like
everyone has their opinion on how you should be a mother and how you should take care of when you're pregnant.
So all that, it's just in everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
So then we have this shame, which falls under the fear judgment. And they're like, well, if I bring this out, what are people going to think of me? And now let's call it what it is. We're in our 40s, and now I'm in my 40s. I don't know how old
I am. Okay. I'm 42.
I didn't want to age you. But it's like, who cares? This is a position of strength.
Right. And the people that are judging you are living in fear.
Yeah.
So they need to switch over to live in love.
So taking that stance and realizing the sooner we can get to these points and sharing as much of this in whatever level, you don't have to go open up the geyser. But like baby steps, we actually start empowering not only ourselves, but everyone around us.
Yeah.
So fear and love. We've talked about fear and love a lot. How would you define fear? Fear is not a bad thing, okay? Sometimes it could sound like I'm saying that it's bad and it's throwing it under the bus. It's something that protects us. It's something that takes care of us, right? Fight or flight. It's danger and all that. When I'm talking about living in fear is living in pessimism, right? Living in doom and gloom, watching the news and thinking the entire world is what's being shown at me. And then choosing love is hard. We've discussed it. We know that it's hard. But how are you navigating that now? Or how have you written some stories about it in your book that we can discuss on the dichotomy of the fear versus the love?
So how am I looking at it now, fear versus love? And I do believe, we have flight or fight. Absolutely. We need, when our body says there's an emergency, we pay attention to that. We feel it in our body. It shows up in our body through, many ways: nausea, anxiety, rashes. How do I navigate that now? I don't know how to answer that necessarily, but let's talk about when I have anxiety. I know that I'm fearing something that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we make ourselves sick because we're fearing something in the future that hasn't happened. And for me now, and it's totally fine if that happens for you. This happens for everyone. But how do you walk yourself through that?
Yeah.
Okay. Say, this is not real. I am safe. Breathing. And I love the mantra. This is actually what I use. I am love. I am loved. If you're in that state of fear, close your eyes and just breathe. I am love. I am loved. Bring awareness back to your body. Do a full body scan and realize that you are safe where you are. And that mantra of love, that's my favorite one, which is what you're doing, which is incredible, and spreading love. And you can bring yourself right out of that moment of fear and back into love.
Yeah. Because it's interesting, like looking at that and using the power of breath and mantra and words. You know, you can have an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And if you notice what's happening to you physically, you're hyperventilating, you're not breathing, you're tightening everything up. So imagine, and it's hard. Look, we get it. It's hard. But taking that moment to take that first breath and then slowing down and slowing down and slowing down. Or if we use fitness as an example, right? Hitting a sprint, you're completely out of wind, and then you take those breaths to start calming yourself down again.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm just looking back at all these moments in life. It's just so important to be present with ourselves. And I think we're so disconnected now with everything going on. And we're either living too far into the future, so we're anxious about like stuff that's not even real and that's not even happening, or we're stuck in the past and then we live in this depression. And we flip-flop back and forth with that when we can be here right in the middle and try to do both and just be. I think we have a really hard time being.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things is presence. And that's where breath, meditation, body awareness comes in. Simple things. Stop. World's a crazy, crazy, crazy place.
I know.
So we just got to do our best in, the season that we're in, and give yourself permission.
Give yourself permission.
Yeah.
So, the young Karena that's out there, what would you say to her? Not you, not your past you, the other young people, boys, girls. What would you say to them now that you start seeing, because you're doing this help with your foundation now, right? And we could touch on, we know therapy is expensive, so I know you support with some of that, so I'd like for you to share some of that information. But what do you start telling now these younger people that are either listening or tuning in, or other parents that are struggling and seeing some of these patterns happen? What are some things that we can see as signs or flags?
Yeah, I mean, signs or flags is if your kid is becoming withdrawn, changing habits, becoming angry. I think that it's really important to check in with them. And I know kids can be very rebellious too as they're teenagers. But definitely just still checking in. I think that's number one. And opening up the conversation when your kids are younger of how are you feeling? What's going on? And, just talking about how you're feeling a normal conversation. Because I don't think I really was ever asked how I was feeling.
No.
And it's still uncomfortable today when someone's like, how are you today? And I'm like, I'm fine. That's
like,
that
autopilot. Yeah.
But it's actually like, if you're genuinely
like,
Ruben, how are you feeling today? And make it genuine and just, and talking about the big silence, and one of my favorite programs that we provide is Therapy for All, because therapy is very expensive and sometimes health insurance doesn't cover it. And a lot of times therapists don't accept health insurance. So through our sponsorship program, we pay for therapy because it's so important. And I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Jewel. She has Inspiring Children Foundation. So if you have kids out there and their main focus is helping youth and their youth programming in real life too. And she's just done so much with Inspiring Children and Jewel Never Broken. And we do the Not Alone Challenge every holiday season with them. And so, yeah, I think between Big Silence and Inspiring Children, those are all the resources you need.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, we brought that up when we spoke earlier because that is sometimes the barrier. I've spent a lot of money on therapy in different capacities to a point. I'm like,
I can't afford this.
I'm like committed to it. I know I need it, but like it can only go so far.
Right.
So it's good to know that there's resources out there, and there's even apps now. Like it is becoming a normal thing.
Yeah.
But we're still far from, especially, you know, I'm Colombian. I have immigrant Colombian parents. My mom thinks, you know, therapy's for crazy people.
Yep.
So, you know, different people think different things, and it is what it is. Or, oh, I don't need that. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But it's actually for everyone. And I think before you even know you're in the thick of the problem.
Preventative therapy is great.
Yeah.
I would say that even for anyone going, let's just say you're happy, you're this, but you're getting married. I even think for a marriage, preventative therapy was great. I didn't do it, but just to know like what you're getting into, it's okay.
No, and that's how I know it's expensive. We did some of that during the pandemic, before kids, before like, we're like, oof, but we got to do it. These are 75 minutes. Let's go.
and therapy is not fun.
No.
It's actually, I would compare it to working out. Like sometimes you don't want to go to the gym, but then you never regret a workout.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when I got back into therapy, like in 2016, 17, and after work, I would be driving to my therapist's office. I'm like, I just want to turn around. But then when I left, I was like, damn, that was so good.
Yeah. And the other thought is like, well, what are we going to talk about today? We don't have problems today.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're in it and your time's up.
You're like, nah.
Yeah.
But it's great. You're in therapy. And then I think also something important to point out is with a therapist, like there's times you just take a break or you find a new therapist. Or I've been in therapy and, you know, a few months go by and we'll sit there and I'm like, I feel great. I have nothing to say today. And she's like, I think I'm done with you. It's like, all right. You know, I graduated from this.
Yeah. You're like, dun, 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 dun.
Our marriage therapist, finally, she's like, you guys are good. And I was laughing. She's like, I don't know why you need to keep seeing me. Like, she's like, I see a lot of couples. I think you're good.
Yeah. Here's your black belt. You can move on now.
But that's the great thing. And then you're like, okay. This is, we're good.
No, that's awesome. There's one thing as we start closing down that I know we talked about and I wanted to just touch on, and judgment of trauma. You know, not everyone's trauma is the same. And, you know, there's stuff as bad as sexual abuse and getting beat down. And there's stuff as quote unquote not as bad as being left at school for 4 hours and abandoned, feeling of abandonment. And there's just being bullied on the playground. And all these levels of trauma affect us however they affect us.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important for us, and I'd love for you to say it in your words as well, as like, because it goes on to judgment, let's not judge each other's trauma.
Right. Yeah, like you said, it could be some kid called me a bad name in kindergarten and I'm holding on to that and I'm triggered by that if someone says that word again to me and when I'm an adult. Or like you said, a big T, little t, it's all the same.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to respect and not judge people's traumas.
Yeah.
I've been through a lot. You've been through a lot. And when I look at the scale of things in the world.
Yeah.
Look at what's going on. But I think it comes back to your word, love.
Yeah.
And love and acceptance and no judgment. It's and just be a good damn person. That's
gonna be the title of our episode.
Be a good damn person. Don't be an asshole.
Oh man. Don't be an asshole. That's for sure. You could have asshole moments. Just don't be an asshole. There's a difference. There is a difference because sometimes, again, we can all have the moment, but
moments are fine.
Yeah.
As long as it's not your full personality.
Totally. So, final question.
Okay.
Karena, how do you define living a life through love?
Living a life through love, to me, is basically everything we've talked about. Being a good damn person. Loving yourself first. And then being able to love someone else and give that love. Because I think the more that we can have that loving energy, we can heal this world. It takes a lot. It takes a lot. But if you can exude love, then we can keep healing.
No, we can, because it's contagious. And all we have to do is affect one person and one person and one person, and look at the community you've built.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, even, say, exuding love. When you're walking down the street, saying hi and smiling. How are you? To a stranger. And a lot of people are looking down, but sometimes they look up and they smile. Like, you just changed that person's day.
Yeah. No, it's a great example, because I walk to the gym every day. And there's days where I'm just like not awake yet. Like, I just want to get to the gym. Like, leave me alone. I'm listening to my podcast on my morning meditation walk. But I still go, good morning. And they say good morning. They look back and you have that moment.
Yeah.
But there are days where you don't want to do. So even doing it, not worrying about what I'm doing for them, changes me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go out there, say hi, smile, wherever you are. My hotel hallway today, people working there. It's like, hi, good morning.
Yeah.
And then like a smile. You're changing somebody's moment in that time.
Yeah. No, another good example. Those are some of my favorite moments because people just overlook them all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just like, do you just clean my, hi, how are you? Yeah, it's just like.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being you.
Thank you for being you.
You're welcome. And where can everybody find you?
You can find me at thebigsilence.com or an Instagram, The Big Silence, or Karena Dawn.
And your book's available everywhere.
Yes. Oh, and I have a podcast. It's called The Big Silence. Got my book, got all the things. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.